Grand Rising Internet. My name is avapemilione. I am a Black and queer writer and the founder and editor-in-chief of Ebony Tomatoes Collective, which is a Black and queer literary magazine. Today, I want to talk about the renaissance of printmaking and zine making that's happening all around the world and how it relates to the terrifying inroads that governments are making to restrict free speech, when even calls for free speech are censored. Print media offers a pro-social alternative to social and corporate media. No media that we create exists in a vacuum. The circulation of print media has always been a tool for the people who want to make a change in their communities, but also communicate what is not accepted or what is not allowed to be broadcasted on mainstream media. And it has always been a tool used to build new political realities. And there are millennia of examples of this, right? So we have like the Black Panthers newspaper, which at its height was circulating hundreds and thousands of copies around the community. And it was seen as a cornerstone of the Black Panthers praxis because it offered an alternative to the media that was being pushed out by government officials and media conglomerates who did not give a fuck about the well-being of Black people and still don't. Even in more historical examples, we have Martin Luther with that original 95 Theses. Like, bro was nailing that shit to the wall, letting the village know, like, there is a new way to engage with religion. And that literally started the Protestant Revolution. And I'll be getting into more examples later on of how important print media is. But I wanted to give this context so we can understand just why so many people are running to print media right now. What is the use of print media in a society like ours, which is so digitized and so reliant upon technology? I think that now we're at a really pivotal point in the media landscape where we see these inroads being made. We see the president shutting down anyone who does not agree with him, who does not support him, and we can see like the portal for what the media will accept and what corporate and social media will allow to go on air, shrinking and shrinking every single day. And there are so many examples of this, but I want to use one example that really stood out to me, which was the whole debacle with Jimmy Kimmel recently. Jimmy Kimmel made a little jokey joke about a podcaster who was beloved among millions in the nation and was murdered in a very politically divisive attack the other week. And following his little jokey joke, Jimmy Kimmel was fired. Disney took down his whole office, and it was looking like bro was chopped, but he actually ended up being reinstated on air, and everyone was at the edge of their seats waiting for this return monologue that he would give, because this was his chance to talk his shit, to speak out about the censorship that he was experiencing at the hands of Donald Trump and other media conglomerates, and essentially to just set the record straight for the whole situation. And most people, at least the folks who aren't conservative, really liked his speech and really stood behind it, because everyone under his comments was like, yes, Jimmy, let's go. But to me, his monologue felt very tame and it felt censored, even though he was up there talking about free speech and dunking Trump and all of that, was still beholden to Disney's interest and the interest of the rest of the stakeholders who are paying his check and allowing him to go back on air, which was not altogether unsurprising, but I was disappointed. And I will give you a few examples of things that stood out to me in his speech. In his speech, Jimmy Kimmel literally cried about the death of the podcaster who he had made fun of just a week ago. Bro shed tears. That is a very different vibe from Jimmy Kimmel's usual political affiliations. To be fair, my mom did say that Jimmy Kimmel cries over like everything and everyone, and she has been like watching his show for years. So I will try not to read too much into that to give him the benefit of the doubt, but I did think it was interesting where his sympathies were lying during this speech and who he decided to shed tears for. He also made a very elaborate joke that wasn't actually a joke about how to resubscribe to Disney and Hulu Plus because people were unsubscribing in droves once he got fired. But now that he's back on air, he's like, forget about all that boycotting shit. Like, y'all are going to resubscribe, right? While he definitely criticized Trump very heavily in this speech and made a lot of jokes on his behalf, Jimmy Kimmel offered a lot of love and understanding and like kumbaya vibes to the people on the right and to folks who support him. He literally said, I have many friends and family members on the right, which he called the other side, and I love them very much, and we just don't talk about politics. And maybe that's what we need right now, right? Like maybe we just need someone who is sane and level-headed to come up on the stage and be a class act and to extend hope and understanding to everyone, no matter what their political affiliations are. And I can give space for that. But I think it's really important to examine like what was allowed to go on air. We don't live in a world anymore where folks can just stand on stage, give a well thought out and hopeful monologue, and that will be enough. We live in a world where ICE officers who are unmasked and unidentified are rounding up thousands of people, robbing them of their due process, robbing them of their voice, disappearing them into detention facilities where they are not able to speak to anyone or to reach out to their families. And the folks who are advocating for them on the other side of state prisons and detention centers are also facing logistical, political, and financial barriers to be able to tell their stories. We live in a world where Black boys are being lynched on college campuses, and it is being ruled as a suicide to the point where Colin Kaepernick had to get an independent autopsy because his family was screaming from the rooftops, "These boys killed our son," and the state is not taking responsibility and they are not speaking about it. And these Black boys are living with a shroud of silence over their dead fucking bodies, and the government does not give a fuck. They want us to be buried under the ground so they cannot hear us when they scream. That is the world we are living in. We are living in a world where public broadcast stations, NPR, PBS, are getting significant slashes to their funding to the point where they don't even know if they're going to be able to keep their doors open, to the point where people are getting laid off in droves, no job, no income, no nothing, because they had the gall to work for an organization that supported free speech and journalism. We are living in a world where our Senate, where our Congress, where the President of the motherfucking United States is doing everything they can to strip away queer and trans rights, to the point where we might not even be able to get married to people we love, to the point where folks are already not having access to the gender affirming healthcare they need. You don't think that shit is silence? You don't think that shit is cutting our tongues from our mouths and preventing us from creating the world that we want to live in and the world in which we can actually survive? We live in a world where even the most prestigious and the most well-respected magazines and universities are bending a knee to the rising tide of fascism, allowing all of their marginalized journalists and students and activists get swept away. And it's interesting to me that Jimmy Kimmel can go up on that stage and say names like Stephen Colbert or Seth Meyers and not say names like Trey Reed and not say names like Mahmoud Khalil and not say names like Rumesia Ozturk and cannot say Palestine. And it's always been like this, right? We as the masses have never been able to place our trust in the broadcast media that we consume. Jimmy Kimmel himself is a victim of censorship. Despite all of his privilege, despite all of his whiteness and wealth, he was shut the fuck down. And it's easy to kind of drink the Kool-Aid and be like, okay, like Disney got their shit together, all is well, Jimmy Kimmel's back on air, like at least things are not getting that bad yet. But I feel like if he had given this speech in 2015 or 2016, it would have been an entirely different monologue. Like, I feel like it would have actually had teeth and he actually would have come for more people than just Trump. Like, he would have talked about more than that and like the state of our country as a whole. So why didn't he? What does it mean when we live in a world where someone can be villainized and deplatformed for saying things that the government does not like, only to go back on stage and thank the people who have deplatformed them? Jimmy Kimmel said, quote, "The people who run this platform have allowed me to evolve and stretch the boundaries, even when it made them uncomfortable, by allowing me to use their platform. And I'm very grateful for that." To which I say, when is it the people's turn to run the platform? When do we stop asking permission to speak the truth? When do we stop pandering to elite discomfort? When is it the people's turn to have a voice? When is it the people's turn to have a place on the page with which we can speak and spread awareness? When is it our turn to have platforms that actually allow us to talk to each other instead of getting roped up in a web of advertisement and AI slop? When is it the people's turn to stop grasping at crumbs for the few things that show up on our feed that are actually relevant to our interest, to the few shows that are actually still speaking truth to power, to the few platforms that are allowing content creators to speak without fear of being silenced or deplatformed or shadow banned? When is it our turn for the people to finally have the voice? Because what is a platform if not something for the people to stand upon, if not a tool to create the types of worlds that we want to see? What is a platform if not something to be used to elevate our consciousness? I want us to really break down the language here because it's still clear that this is their platform. And as much as people enjoyed that Jimmy Kimmel was put back on air and reinstated, it is still not his platform. It will never be his platform, just like it is not the platform of marginalized people, of Black people, or of trans people. And so what happens to a platform when it isn't run by the people? What happens to a platform where it becomes more of a stage or a screen where media conglomerates and rich billionaire CEOs can control what goes on air, can control what is said? What happens when the platform stops being a platform and starts being a prison where only certain things are let in and out? And this is where print media comes in. And this is not just something that's important and relevant to writers or creators or people who want to talk their shit on the platforms. It is giving an opportunity for people to recreate the platform in their image. It is giving folks a chance to say what they have to say and to share information that matters to them without asking for permission, without pandering to elitist comfort, without being given just a little inch of visibility and being forced to thank the very people who have silenced and deplatformed you. That is the power of print media, because even though printing is very expensive and very inconvenient, it, in a weird way, is really accessible to the average person. Like, if you know what to do and you know how to print a zine, like, you can very easily do that and sell it or give it away to people in your community. We're learning how to print and edit magazines and connect to booksellers. And I think that's really attractive for a generation who has been forced to rely on digital channels for their news and employment opportunities and information as a whole, because we see that the platform has become more of a cage where only certain information and certain people are allowed to come in and out. So I started Ebony Tomatoes, my literary magazine, in 2022, and I started it when I was a junior in college because I was in NYU screenwriting program at the time, and I just did not feel represented. I did not feel like I had the voice that I wanted to have in some of my classes. And as a Black and queer writer, I just felt really isolated and wanted to build community. So I started a writers group for Black women in 2022. And that was a place for folks to just like get together remotely and workshop their writing and talk about what it meant to be a Black writer in this day and age. A few of us who were really into the writers group got together and developed Ebony Tomatoes Collective, which is a literary magazine for Black folks with intersectional identities. In the 3 years that I've been running Ebony Tomatoes, the scene around print media has changed drastically. There are so many print magazines and collectives and publications that are popping up all around the country with so many different intersections and communities behind it. Like, we get DMs at least like every few days from a new literary magazine who's like, hey, we're starting a literary magazine. Especially in queer spaces, there is so much organizing around printmaking and lit mag making. And if you're a queer person in a city, like, you have definitely heard of a zine fair going on in your area. A lot of literary magazines are going viral on social media for the work that they're doing. And it's just very, very clear to me that people are moving towards analog media, in addition with like social media and digital media as well, because there is a hunger there. There is a need for something that you can hold in your hands and read, and you know that it was made for people who had you in mind. And I think that's a very powerful act of resistance, but it's also such an amazing way to build community and get to know other people and also deepen your creative practice if you're into that type of thing. And you can see it in the way that a lot of literary magazines have grown. When I first created Ebony Tomatoes, I was definitely craving like more of a Black community in my life, more of a queer community in my life. And that's why I created the writers group, was because I felt like, shit, like, I'm really just in this alone. And now, like, the situation could not be more different. Like, I have built such a loving and strong community of Black writers and creatives and artists who really love the work that Ebony Tomatoes is doing and also have supported it wholeheartedly. Like whenever we throw a launch party, it's such a pleasure to see familiar faces come back and like do our little activities and engage with the magazines we're putting out. When we first started, we were struggling to get any visibility, and now we have thousands of followers across our social media channels, and we've sold hundreds of copies of our magazines around the country, and we also host events around the country. So our LA coordinator Isabel will do photo shoots in LA, or Cheyenne and Cecilia, who are in New York, are holding it down at certain zine fairs. There is such a strong collective of people who really believe in this work that's grown over the past few years. And I think that that is not going to slow down. And through Ebony Tomatoes, I've met such an incredible community of people who have dedicated so much of their time and creativity and labor into creating the print issues that Ebony Tomatoes is responsible for. And it has literally changed me as a person. Like, engaging with print media in such a fastidious and consistent way over the past few years has taught me so much, not just about writing or editing, but about being a person who is in community, like how to show up, how to plan an event and plan it intentionally so that all of the party goers feel safe and welcome to be there. Like, these are really important lessons, not just as someone who enjoys writing or believes in print media, but as someone who wants to truly make friends and make connections and engage more intentionally. These are people skills. These are life skills. And more than that, these are skills that we're going to need as our government resources are being stripped away from us one by one. Print media is not just words on a page, y'all. It is a battle for information, a desire to communicate with the world around us and to shape the world around us. And it is a spell and a manifestation for a better version of ourselves and a better version of the world. And so I think it's easy to write off literary magazines because folks are like, well, not everyone reads and not everyone likes to read, and like people prefer books and blah, blah, blah. But these literary magazines are popping off, y'all. Like, it is kind of like an underground scene for sure, but I definitely think there are literary magazines that are proving that there is a market for this and that there is an undeniable hunger amongst the people for print media. And one of my favorite examples of this is a literary magazine called Dream World Girlzine. It was founded in April 2024, so last year, by Daphne Bryant. She was a graduate from Emerson College, and she started Dream World Girlzine as a literary magazine about girlhood and reminiscence and all of those lovely things that come with just growing up as a girl, you know how it is. But Dreamworld Girlzine has grown so much in less than 2 years, and I think the fact that it's grown so exponentially is a testament to Daphne's talent and the talent of the team behind the magazine, but it's also a testament to how readily people are willing to engage with like alternative forms of media, because in less than 2 years, Dreamworld Girlzine has built over 30,000 followers on Instagram alone. They have collaborated with really big brands like We're Not Really Strangers. They have really cute merch, and they've worked with creatives all around the world and have also gained recognition by some celebrities. Print media is coming back to the mainstream, whether we like it or not, and I think that it is an overwhelmingly positive thing. I believe that zines offer a pro-social alternative to social media. So what do I mean by pro-social? So there's pro-social behavior and there's anti-social behavior. So pro-social behavior is like volunteering, caring about other people, being a generally good person. Whereas antisocial behavior, it's basically just behavior that is hostile to society and its values. So when we look at the way that zines or print media and social media operate, we can see a really clear divide in pro-social and anti-social environments. Because obviously media is not people. It cannot act on its own volition. But what it can do is inspire people to act and inspire people to think differently. So any media that really takes the world by storm is going to have an environment around it that reflects its platform, the form that it takes, whether it's words on a page or screens or television screens, as well as the content that lies within the platform, right? So when we look at magazines versus social media, we can kind of pick apart the environment that has grown out of these forms of media and how they differ through the lens of pro-social and antisocial behavior. So the first thing that we can look at as barometers of pro-social versus antisocial media is its core values, right? Like, what does this platform believe in? What does it want to do for the world? And magazines and print media, it's not a lucrative industry, at least not for right now. So a lot of the joy that comes from zines is in the making of the magazines, in the creative collaboration, working with other writers and artists and like graphic designers who want to make the issue the best that it can be. So it not only promotes creative collaboration, but it requires it in order to survive. And meanwhile, on social media, we see a very different situation where the core values really revolve around individual displays of wealth and fame and glory. The things that go viral on Instagram, it's usually one person flexing something, whether it's flexing that they're smarter or are rich or really beautiful. Social media values the exceptional while zines honor the mundane. Social media rewards and glorifies the individual, whereas literary magazines promote the collective. Because for social media, like it's already being run by a team of people. Like we don't need a collective of people to create an Instagram account. You just need one person who wants to get famous. Whereas at literary magazines, everyone's specific talents and skill sets are valued and needed, and all of it can come together to create something inspiring that the collective will therefore enjoy and benefit from. The next factor we have to consider in weighing pro-social versus anti-social media is the labor structure. So pro-social behavior often involves volunteerism. It means doing things out of the kindness of your own heart and not expecting anything else in return. That is pro-social behavior. And if you know anything about literary magazines, you know that in this way, they are pro-social as fuck, because most of the people who run literary magazines are not getting paid at all. Being that it is such an up-and-coming form of media and that a lot of folks are still getting into it, and the fact that printing and shipping is extremely and prohibitively expensive, most people who are really involved in literary magazine space are not getting paid for it. At the moment, I am not getting paid for Ebony Tomatoes or for running it, even though it is a very time-consuming and very complex effort, which contrasts very greatly with the compensation structure of social media in many cases. So while zines are being run by oftentimes Black and queer and trans and disabled volunteers who are really just grinding away for the sake of their community and for the sake of their art-making practice, social media is obviously run by billionaires and tech conglomerates and stakeholders who have very specific interests that are all tied to profit. Like that is the ultimate goal, is profit, but also of ownership, right? So they not only want to make the most amount of money, but we are shifting from a capitalist system to a techno-oligarchy system. And so now they are not only looking for profit, but also for control and ownership of the streams of information. And that's why we see the media landscape shifting around entertainers like Jimmy Kimmel, because up until this point, like Jimmy Kimmel was bringing in the millions, he was earning Disney some funds, and that was enough. He was able to speak on the things he wanted to speak about without repression. But now the situation has changed a lot, where they wouldn't let him back on air until he could not only make them money, but also abide by their control. And that is what's happening on a lot of media platforms, but print media is doing something very different. I think we can also view the antisocial and pro-social dichotomy through the lens of in-person gatherings. So for print media, launch parties are becoming an increasingly important part of how literary magazines operate, because there are so many literary magazines popping up around the country, and there are so many lit mags that just want to like rise above the noise and build a dedicated readership. And in my experience, launch parties are the way that that happens. I talked to a journalist recently who said that literary magazines are becoming like the next big thing to do in New York, and I can absolutely believe it, because I've been to some literary magazine parties that have been like so fire, like so much dancing, great DJ sets, like pretty affordable drinks. Sometimes they'll even have a free open bar. And I've also met people at literary magazine launch parties who have connected me to paid writing opportunities, which is something that does not usually happen for me over social media, sadly. Literary magazine launch parties are such a cool thing because they not only bring people together in community, but they also bring folks together around a shared intention. Whenever there's a literary magazine launch party, like you are coming to celebrate media. You know you are coming to celebrate a grassroots collective or publishing team that has put their blood, sweat, and tears into this magazine for the past few months. And it really just changes the energy of the space. Like everyone is so much more respectful, and a lot of literary magazines also host masked events or remote launch party gatherings for folks who are disabled or immunocompromised. So that is definitely something that folks can tap into as well. So when literary magazines are creating their launch parties, they're definitely coming in being like, how can I serve my community? How can I get people together in a room? How can I embody the physical through the ways that I host a space and share information with the people that I care about? They usually have a speech or a little statement from the editor-in-chief. They're coming into a space that is something bigger than themselves. And when people are given the opportunity to step into something more grand and more loving than they themselves can muster, there is so much collective power that is formed through those gatherings. And so I think that is really the power of literary magazines launch parties, like not only for the fun or for the networking or for the connections, but just to be able to exist in a room where you are valued as a reader. And I think that sense of collective responsibility and collective creativity is really powerful and really needed. And when you go to a literary magazine launch party, like you can feel that shit. Like people are engaging over work. The conversations that people are having are a step above what I think I would hear at an average party, because people are coming in with a certain awareness and a certain perspective already to respect and engage with the people who are in the room with them, while also supporting a community organization. It's very pro-social because it's promoting actual society where people are talking to each other, learning from each other, having fun with each other in the same space. And it contrasts a lot with how social media functions in relation to in-person gatherings, because social media most of the time and corporate media, they make their money and they gain their control when you are inside on your screen. So they don't have a real vested interest in getting your ass outside. They don't really want you to make in-person friends. They don't want you to actually learn with people who might be in your same block or your same city, because what does that do for them? Like, their realm is not in the physical. Their realm is in creating a digital world that they can control. And so as long as you're on the screen and you're in that world, they can control you and they can profit off of you. The last thing I'll say about the divide between pro-social and anti-social platforms is the content of the work that is coming out of these platforms. So in literary magazines and zines and print media, we really value cutting-edge, uncensored work. We want work that lies in the intersections between different communities so we can serve multiple communities with the stories we're telling. We often want stories from underrepresented writers or writers who are not being given a voice from their governments or media platforms. Anything that is not possible in digital media can be made possible through print media, because we just have a page and we can lay it out and say whatever we want. Also very pro-social because it supports a lot of writers who might be struggling to get visibility on digital channels because of the way that it's structured. Whereas corporate media values entertainment and shock factor and emotional extraction. So they care less about the quality of work or the quality of writing or even who is saying what. Algorithms and very digitized and streamlined forms of information and emotional extraction only cares about how much you're reacting to something and how much you're engaging with something. And that's a very different type of dependency, right? Like zines depend on us for what we can create, and social media and corporate media depends on us for what we can provide to the extraction apparatus and our emotions, no matter how good or how bad they may be. On a pro-social platform like literary magazines, you can't really lose anything. Like, it's not exclusive. A lot of literary magazines also have digital social media channels where they gain a lot of their readership and actively engage with the social media world. But they also offer an alternative to that you can use in addition with social media when you want something that's slower and more intentional and more carefully curated and isn't beholden to the 24-hour news cycle. But at the same time, zines and literary magazines right now are being made by people who live in the same world as we do. So we're going to see really fun visuals, really fun creative risk being taken, and also updated information being shared, because a lot of magazines come out multiple times a year. So you are getting a very current and updated stream of information from writers who have really deeply researched the topics that they're talking about, and also a team of editors who have reviewed and thoroughly fact-check all of the things that you are reading within the pages. So you really can't lose out by introducing a pro-social media into your rotation with the usual Instagram, TikTok, cable news. The people want print media. As I reach the last part of this argument, I want to address a counterpoint that folks might have. Literacy rates are at an all-time low. We know that most folks don't want to be reading like that. Like, is this renaissance of printmaking and zines just another example of like appropriating the past? Like, is this just like the hipsters with the vinyls? And I think that's a good question. And to that I say, maybe. I don't know. I have no way of knowing how many people are actually reading literary magazines or engaging with them, because so much of the way that we distribute is underground and is not surveyed and is not tracked. But I think whether or not people are reading them in droves right now does not erase the fact that people are creating them, and that there is an interest that is burgeoning all around the world for media like this. And you can see it in cooperative bookstores that are popping up around New York, in zine fairs that are happening around the country. You can see it in the open mics that are going down in Appalachia and rural areas around America. And I'm not just saying this because I've read it. Like, I've been to all of these things. I've been to all these literary communities, and every place I've traveled, I have made it a point to find the print and zine space in all of them, because it's something I'm passionate about. And 9 times out of 10, I find it there. So I think that, there are two worlds that we're living in. There is a world where people do not want to engage with print media or feel intimidated by it for many reasons. But I also think there is another world where people are really embracing the knowledge that has been stolen from them and are finding ways to access and archive that information. This is not just a continuation of the bookmaking legacy. This is a way for us to reclaim knowledge in a world that is rapidly taking our information and communication channels by the balls. And we are saying, like, no, we're not going to let that happen. We are not going to let you silence us. And even if you silence us on all the channels, on all the social media platforms, on all the platforms that exist on the internet, there is a world and raw materials outside of the internet that we can create with and that we can get to know each other through. And again, I just want to bring it back to the fact that this is a continuation and a rebirth of a historical movement of zine making. Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston literally had a literary magazine called Fire in 1926, and it was Black and it was queer and it was raunchy. And even though the literary magazine only went on for like 1 season because the place that they were printing burned down, we have Fire. You can read it online. And a lot of the writing that's in Fire probably would not have been published by like mainstream publishers at that time. But because the Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurstons of the world took it upon themselves to create something for their community, now the people who came after them a century later knows that it is possible to do so. And so that was happening a century ago, and it's still happening today. And there are future Zora Neale Hurstons, future Langston Hughes, future Audre Lordes who are doing this hard work right now. And I think that it is in our best interest to support them, not only to support the teams who are doing this work, but to support ourselves as people who want the truth, as people who want knowledge and information, because literary magazines offer us a space where we can be more than a reader, more than a consumer. Like on digital platforms, the human mind is a unit of commerce. The individual is something that is being used as a raw resource in order to fuel the platform and the way that it extracts from us. Whereas at literary magazines, we don't just have to be a unit of commerce. We don't have to just be something that's extracted from for our energy and attention and clicks. We can be someone who wants to go to a party and meet friends. We can be someone who wants to submit our work to these literary magazines or annotate between the margins. The people will always crave the knowledge that was stolen from us. And literary magazines and print media offer a way for us to take that knowledge back, and we will be all the better for it. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, comment, and share far and wide. As much as I love print media, the support that I get on here from y'all allows me to continue the work that I'm doing and to keep sharing my truth. So thanks so much.